Thank you so much to the organizers, and in particular Peter, for giving me the opportunity to present at this great conference. My name is Clare Wang, and I'm a professor of accounting and the research director for the Center of Ethics and Social Responsibility at the University of Colorado Boulder. Today I'm going to talk about a joint project with my colleagues Austin Moss and Jim Nogden, and it's about the relevance or irrelevance of ESG disclosure to retail investors. A little bit background. So ESG investing, as everyone knows, has risen to a hotly politicized debate, particularly with President Biden's first veto this past spring. So on the left side of this slide, you can see that some headlines regarding whether the government should be playing a role in private American citizens' ESG investments through regulation. And on the right side of the slide, there are mixed evidence on the average American's awareness and a preference for ESG investing. Some survey evidence suggests that we don't even know what the ESG acronym stands for, while other surveys do find that there is support from citizens for ESG goals. But before regulation that involves direct intervention on ESG investing, we can see that there are ESG disclosure regulations emerging, right? Globally, the there is ISSB, International Sustainability Standards Board, that is going to be the standard setter for disclosure of sustainability information. And in the US, the SEC proposed this 490-page climate disclosure rule last year, which is expected to be finalized in the fall. So from an accountant's perspective, the disclosure regulations make a lot of sense as a first or intermediate step because it is often less costly, and then proper measurement and the transparencies are good features of markets in general. So this is a good step. Disclosure regulations often come before direct interventions or concurrently with direct intervention. So I want to make two observations regarding these disclosure regulations. First, as in the US at least, one of the key constituents for the SEC is average American citizens or mom and pop retail investors. That's who the SEC as a regulator cares about the most. And the second of all, firms have been voluntarily disclosing ESG information for a long time before the regulations come out. So our research question in this study then is to look at whether and how retail investors do respond to ESG related disclosures that are already in existence before these new regulations. And in that sense, we can shed light on whether, provide some evidence on whether and how these regulations should come into effect. So from an academic literature perspective, if we look at the prior literature, theoretical studies would suggest that ESG disclosures matter. They would attract investors who have a taste for these type of activities. And then there are a lot of lab experiment surveys that have been done where they show that investors or subjects in the laboratory do prefer to value managers' decisions to be engaged in these environmental, social, and governance goals, and that positively and it was able to make investment decision based on these disclosures. And that these information, the ESG information ESG performance does not have to be correlated with cash flows. It's simply that investors have a preference for them. So those are the experimental studies in the lab. In terms of empirical studies based on large data, we don't have much on retail investors, partly because of a lack of data on retail investors' actual decision making. We have some information, we have some studies on mutual fund where we can see that perception of sustainability drive mutual fund flows, but limited evidence on retail, and that's partly driven by lack of data. So what my co-authors and I did was we came across a new set of data, which is based on Robinhood markets. So Robinhood is a FINRA-approved, everyone knows, SEC-registered broker-dealer, and they were made famous by GameStop. And so a lot of retail investors or private citizens trades on Robinhood now. And then on Robinhood, what they had was this popularity index or the positions. And then what it does is it shows that how many people have the position on Robinhood, how many users have positions on Robinhood. And so you can see that on May 20th, Walmart has about 58,000 Robinhood users hold a position in Walmart. And then you can track this through a website called RobinTrack, the time series of this data. And as you can see here, if I highlight this, this is for Nike, and you can see a jump. And then around September 2020, and that was when the Colin Kaepernick commercial was aired. And so that's where we saw that's where we saw that, and anecdotally, we should be able to find some evidence there is anecdotal evidence supporting that retail investors react to these announcements. But now let's take it to the empirical data from a larger perspective. So based on the Robinhood data, we have about, we constructed 5 dependent variables based on their trading behavior, so the change in the positions, and we also have some volatility measures to capture the information content or the disagreement amongst the Robinhood users. And then for firm disclosure, we capture ESG press releases from CSR Wire and Ravenpack. So overall, for about June 2018 to December 2019, we have 830 ESG press releases. And we also have other press releases that's non-ESG, such as like dividend or changing management, so on and so forth. So based on that, we capture 4 types of days. There's days where firms release ESG information, firms release non-ESG information, and then most importantly, there's earnings announcement dates. Those are the most important financial information release. And then all other days are what we call non-event days. We run a traditional standard event study analysis. And as you can see, I will first talk about the red. In the columns are the different different Robinhood retail investor position changes. And in the rows, I will first talk about the red. You can see a lot of investor reactions on earnings announcement dates. As expected, these are the most important, these are where massive amount of information come out. And then on the yellow, you can see those are the non-ESG PR days. So dividend, management changes, so on and so forth. There is Robinhood users do react to those announcements as well. But when we move to the green, the ESG press release days, there is no statistically significant reaction at all. And then while we compare the red, the green with the yellow, you can see that there is a statistic difference between the two. So in other words, what we're seeing here as a main result is retail investors are not reacting to ESG press releases, even though they are reacting to other press releases, particularly earnings announcements. Okay, so they do not adjust their portfolio. So a lot of the questions then come on why we didn't find a result. I think some challenges. Number one, there's lack of economic content. These press releases are not important. Okay, so what we do is we actually find and document that there is market return, total market return, and a volume response to these press releases. So what this is saying is market is reacting. So institutional investors might be reacting, but retail investors are not. The second concern is that there's lack of visibility on these press releases. They're on a website, and then investors may not get the message. Here, what we try to do is we took the ones that are most visible according to another set of True Value Labs data, that we identify press releases that are widely disseminated, and we still cannot find a reaction. Finally, there is an idea that ESG information is hard to integrate. Like, how does it affect valuation right away? So to address this concern, what we did is we look at an announcement or an event, or namely Fortune's 100 best companies to work for in America. This is a specific type of release where we know it's highly visible. It's easy for investors to incorporate because we know that it generates positive returns in the long term. Many studies have shown that. And then so that still we find no difference in retail investors' portfolio adjustments to this highly visible event. Okay. So overall, what we find is retail investors do not adjust their holding for individual firm securities in response to these disclosures. So the results kind of differs from the experimental study a little. And then also we want to highlight that there's potential differential response between retail and institutional investors. So the information is useful to some, to the institutional investors, because there's a market response, but not to retail investors. So practical importance here to regulators and standard setters, given the increased focus on developing the standard corporate ESG disclosure, is to take into account that the demand from retail investors and with institutional investors might be very different. So with that, I want to thank again to the organizers and also for all of you to participate in this conference.